good afternoon, and welcome to this live webinar and Social Geek Radio podcast. My name is Jack Munson. I'm from Social Joey, and I'm glad you've joined me here today for this very unique one-on-one conversation with Bruce Linton. For those on the webinar, feel free to type in any questions you have for Bruce in the comments section, and I'll be glad to ask those throughout the interview. So let's get right to our interview with Bruce Linton. He's the founder and former chairman and CEO at Canopy Growth Corporation. He's now the co-founder of Ruckify and the Better Software Company, and he's joining us today. Bruce, welcome, and thanks for the conversation today. I'm looking forward to this.
Oh, me too. I hope we have as much fun through this next half hour as we did before the whole thing started.
Well, maybe we can trade some stories about airline travel and food in Chicago and lots of other good stuff there too. But I really want to learn a little bit more about your journey. You took a company with 0 customers to nearly $20 billion in 6 years. Tell me about that journey.
Yeah, some people would say, well, is it stressful to create a company that goes on that trajectory that went from also me walking around what used to be an abandoned Hershey factory that was previously for all of Canada, and then buying it and going from that starting to 10 locations in Canada and 16 countries around the globe and hiring about 4,500 people in that time. And my answer is no, that is not stressful. What is stressful is when you have a business and there's no phone calls, when there's no money, and you look around and you think, well, I'm gonna have to tell these people they're fired. So that was a terrific ride, and it really came down to a couple of things. And it's kind of what I try to do every time I start a business, and I don't nail it as often or as well as it happened with Canopy, but I try to look at it and say, is there a macro trend here? Is there some kind of big public policy change? Is there a regulatory outcome? So I've previously been in telecom, and the reason telecom and datacom were exciting was the into telcos. You used to be served by Pac Bell, I think, where you are maybe, or 9X if you're in New York.
Yeah.
And these guys all of a sudden had competitors, and it was awesome. So I jumped in that space because what I could see was there was an arms race. The incumbents had competitors, the incumbents had cash, and the competitors had ambition and technology. And so the reason I started a marijuana company, I was probably the only person on the planet that started a marijuana company that became the biggest in the world that had never purchased marijuana. But I started it because public policy in Canada was evident that it was going to go from what governments in the US and around the world are doing, and what Canada used to do is they used to ignore cannabis. When I say that, they really didn't enforce it as a police action as much. And when they ignored it, it was about an $8 billion business in Canada that exclusively went to criminals. And so they decided they were going to quit ignoring it and start researching it and start making it more available in a regulated way for the whole country in Canada. That was 2013. And then we had an election about almost 5 years ago now, where a guy with really nice hair and okay ideas became our prime minister. And he said, if you elect me, I'm going to let you have cannabis across the country. And remarkably, Canadians went, well, that sounds better than ignoring. And so I was fortunate that when I started the business, it was for the simple supply chain reason that I knew I could control, not losing any. Governments like it if you have good controls on regulated products. But then a bunch of events occurred that propelled us forward, but we always had an ambition to be global. So I would say that a bunch of things have to go right, but it's very difficult for that to occur if you start with it. I don't like inventing a technology and looking for a problem. I like looking for a problem and inventing a technology. And so I think with Better and with Ruckify, what we've tried to do is the latter, where so many people come and ask me for investments because they've invented a widget and they wonder if I could possibly find a use for it. And the neat part of the concluding part of the story, people online didn't know about it, is I've been giving quite a lot of career advice to people I meet over the last 8 weeks, 9 weeks now. And my advice has been to them, they should get fired as soon as they can, because I was fired from Canopy and I became really popular. But what I explained to them is if you want to be really popular when you're fired, what you should do is build a company from 0 to 20 billion, have about 5 billion in the bank, be trading at about 85% of the 52-week high of the stock, and then get fired. because you would not believe how many people actually want to talk to you when you become available on that basis. And so that's, I've spent my summer a lot of the time with the Better Ruckify guys looking at what we're doing, how we're rolling it out, how fast can we go, how big can we make it, how many happy customers can we have, what feature set is not there, when's it going to be there, all that kind of stuff. But I've also been spending a lot of time looking at, what else will I do in the sector of cannabis.
So let's talk a little bit about entrepreneurship. You mentioned getting fired, and I think there's a lot of entrepreneurs out there who've just been fired.
Yes.
So right, and there's something liberating about that, isn't there?
Well, the first time you get fired is not as easy to take, but fortunately for me, this was not the first time I've been fired, and it usually happens when what you do is you grow a business very quickly with VCs, and sometimes they get crazy. So I no longer let VCs in the party, venture capitalists. But usually, if you can reflect, everybody knows that it's the time for things sometimes to change. So I would say that one of my jokes, and it's not a great one, is that there's a methodology now that we can diagnose all entrepreneurs. The regrettable thing is there's no cure. And so most people who are entrepreneurs principally because they want to do what they want to do. They want to take their time and apply it with energy greater than they would be allowed to in a normal workplace. They want to have the decision choice, and they want to sleep at night knowing that it's their fault or their success. And so I'm an entrepreneur. I grew up as a farmer. I didn't even know farmers were entrepreneurs, but if you think about it, farmers are kind of entrepreneurs.
Sure. The ultimate working for yourself.
Yeah. And so I really think that there's always going to be a window in time when an entrepreneur runs into something that could be troublesome. What I'm doing now as I go forward is I'm setting up what's called a voting control, which simply says that I and the other people who work here, including the board members, if they are not part of an investor group, have a 10-to-1 voting right on the stocks over just straight capital. And so then that means rather than having a power struggle in the future, if somebody wants to have a change, you have a discussion. And if they make a compelling argument why I or others should leave, I'm not unreasonable. I don't want to stay at a party nobody wants me at. Like that's sort of but it should not be a power struggle. It should be a compelling argument.
With all of these,
do that. Make sure you have voting trust, 10-to-1 minimum.
Have voting trust. What else can you look at some of these young entrepreneurs that are coming to you for advice that you can look at them and think, wow, this person's going to be wildly successful, or this person is probably not going to be successful? Can you get a good sense of that early on talking to these folks?
I used to think more so yes than no. And the reason I kind of sigh and say that is anybody who's watching this knows that occasionally you get lucky. Like on a Monday, you come up with a great idea, and by Friday, you're a millionaire. That doesn't happen too often. Usually what has to happen is on Monday, you work on it, and by Friday, you got 3 new things you need to do with it. And you got to think all weekend and work all the next week. And so when I look at who I think can be successful that I can work with and invest in, first, they have to have energy. And the energy has to be durable. It has to be something that people can't take it away. These people have to apply their energy because this takes a lot of work. Everything does. Then I have to know that they have integrity, that I'm not going to be concerned that they're going to be grabbing the money, that I don't have to really actually look at the accounting. And the final thing is they have to be having IQ. You have to be able to think it through and be open to ideas. And I borrow these 3 themes from one of my mentors because he and I drove around in a car for a couple hours 3 weeks ago talking about why the heck do we potentially get along? Why could we work together? And why do people sometimes find it challenging to work with us? And so now when I look for people, I want to see a history of durable effort, because I don't know any entrepreneurial endeavor that doesn't take and evolve and succeed based on primarily the entrepreneur's endurance and effort. And I've received a few awards. I always thought the awards were the wrong thing. Oh, congratulations, you're the CEO of the year because you grew a company as you described it. I think if I was giving trophies for Canopy, it would have been for the 2 occasions that we didn't go bankrupt. And on one occasion, it would have been extremely embarrassing, but about almost now 5 years ago, the company closed the financing on December 27th at about 3 p.m., which was good because we did not have enough money to begin January 1st.
Oh boy.
Now, can you imagine how embarrassing it would be to have gone bankrupt trying to be a pot dealer? You might have been the first pot dealer in the history of pot dealers to go bankrupt. But I think that would have had merit for an award because nobody wanted to fund that kind of endeavor in late 2013. Nobody. And so finding a few $1 million then was materially harder than finding 4 billion US about a year ago.
Got it. So on the subject of entrepreneurship, there are a lot of entrepreneurs in the franchising space that we're both involved in.
Yep.
Let's talk a bit about that franchising space. You and your team at the Better Software Company are very involved there, building software for small businesses, franchisees. What about this franchise model right now makes you want to be involved?
Well, I think brands matter, right? When people are consumers in any culture, there's a high trust equation with a brand that they identify across a bunch of community categories. So people are going to be more probable to say, I know that one, I'm going to go to that one. And what we want to be able to do is take what we do and make that a more efficient transaction for the operator so they can actually make more occur, make more money, and do a better job. And so when you have a franchise, you have a brand. What you have to do is execute behind the brand because a brand is a name people remember. You don't want them to remember it because it sucks. You want them to remember it and say, you should tell everybody go there and go to that particular one. They do a terrific job. And so I think what we're trying to do is enhance the ability to execute behind a brand, given all the tools that are provided by the franchise developer aren't sufficient to actually be successful in every category. And I think when people stop and say, that's what's happening for me. I actually need to get from the clicks to the bricks. I need to do it more efficiently. I need to do better, pick a function. That's where we play. And there are more and more franchises out there. It's a highly competitive platform. It's not like, oh, I own the only fast burger joint. It's called McDonald's. No, that's called 1972.
Yeah.
And so when you think about every function that can be performed under a franchise, there are competitors, and what you need to be able to do is outcompete. And I think we enable that.
What spaces within franchising are most interesting to you? Is it restaurants? Is it home services? Is it B2B stuff within franchising? Anything really kind of jump out at you as a place where you want to be involved over the next few years?
Well, I think you'll see us scale up, but like home services are all about scheduling and management of labor, being at the right place at the right time, the correct drive pattern. There's a whole bunch of functionality in making sure that you have an efficient home service model, that whether it's, think of maids. So something like that is something we do very well in. But I think what you're going to find is every year we layer on more and more functionality and expertise and keep expanding the pool that we assist. What gets neat is as you go around the clock, some of these businesses are actually going to have inventories of things which they don't need or use seasonally, perhaps, or by time of day. And so some of the franchises using the Better Software over time will have an inventory of assets they're going to want to put on Rockify. And Rockify allows them to monetize or underutilized tangible assets. Could be anything like a skid steer to a scuba tank. What I think is going to be interesting over time is that the people who are wise enough to adopt the Better platform are going to have a material advantage of having a better software platform into which they can then take a secondary line of business and further monetize their assets. And so I'm going to be quite eager to see somewhere out maybe 18 months from now where these things have a great linkage between the two. But right off the bat, the first time I experienced the software was when a car cleaning service. So it used to be called Cody Car Cleaning. And typically when you get your car detailed, that is not a positively memorable experience. Having the clean car is great, but the person who did it, the process is usually, So
do I want that person in my car to make the car dirtier before it gets cleaned? Yeah,
exactly. And why am I going to this terrible location that's dirty itself to get my car cleaned? So when I first experienced the software, this is several years ago, it was when the Codys were running a variety of businesses using applications they created. And one was a car cleaning business, which you brought your car to the parking lot at work. They coordinated the day, the space, they got your key. They did a terrific job on the cleaning. You received an electronic invoice and an electronic notification of when it was completed. And then you got a reminder about 2.5 or 3 months later, your car might be dirty again. Would you like it detailed again? And it was all like, I couldn't be dumb and forget stuff. I got
Yeah.
triggered to the right responses, and I had everything the way I wanted. So that's when I started digging into the underlying applications, because having a clean car is beneficial, but it certainly wasn't the memorable aspect of that. And that's how I became a funder in the Better Software company and co-founder of the overall thing.
And it feels like services like that are right in line with consumers today, where a few years ago, I think everybody was chasing the best bargain and, who could clean my car or do my windows or whatever the service is for the cheapest amount, the lowest dollar amount. And now it feels like maybe it's just a sign of the times, but we are trading low cost for convenience in almost everything we do. Do you see that with a lot of these brands?
100%. And you even just look at some of these things. Like, I don't even like to lift my arm to wave a taxi down. Like, I just strike and use Uber. Like, good God, and Uber's gone up in price. We started using it because it was inexpensive. In that migratory path you described, Uber's actually become relatively cost expensive in certain markets. If you're in San Francisco and take an Uber, you're actually cheaper most often than take a cab, but we still don't want to lift our arm.
Yeah.
So I think what you're going to find is that as soon as people, the way I look at it is, when people get into a pattern behavior that provides the outcome they're satisfied with, the only reason they alter that pattern is because the outcome is no longer acceptable. And so when you think about it that way, what Better is doing is locking in the likelihood of a consistent pattern of delivery, which means you have a much lower risk on losing that client. I don't question. The only thing that alters most people's behavior is disappointment.
Love that. Let's talk about your team. I want to talk about your partners and the team and the circle that you've built around yourself. What do you look for the most in whether it's your partners or the team that are actually building the brand and the software and the operations and everything? What do you really look for first?
So most of the software development is done in a place called Ottawa, Canada. And Ottawa, Canada is a good place to do software development, and that it has many big, deep telecom companies. And if you make telecom software, things that handle photonic and I'll call it switching gear and all this, it tends to be people who are not excited about telling you how they made an over-the-top app or a new game. These are people who want to actually make stuff that their satisfaction comes from knowing it's great, it works, and there's no complaints. And so they tend to not be hipsters. They tend to be more nerdsters and geeks. And so the result is that you're able to hire a lot of people who like making great software, but they don't have to get constant social validation that somebody's using their app. And so I think with the stuff for Better, that's been a good thing. Second part is we need to always try to have product managers who comprehend what the customer wants. So we've spent a lot of time and money being at the shows. In fact, it was kind of funny, the franchise show in New York, I can't remember when it was, about July maybe?
Yeah, I think June, the International Franchise Expo.
Yeah, so the last 2 years, that show has been held concurrent with the Cannabis Expo.
Yes, in the Javits Center.
Yeah, and for the last 2 years, there's been a big honking picture of me talk about cannabis, and all my friends who go to the actual business show for the franchises go and take a picture with my banner doing something stupid, so I can tell who's been at that, whether it's guys from like Smoked Poutine to these dingbats going. But when you go around that show, you need to make sure your product manager actually understands what's going on, that your salespeople understand who they need to connect with, what the problems are, and that they actually have big ears. And they need to have big ears because they got to listen. And then come back and turn it into specs. So we're not trying to build software based on I want this. It's being based on a roadmap, which is from listening and evolving. And so we constantly track internally the customer satisfaction of how our product works. And I can confirm to you that about 2 years ago, it was not good. The software was insufficiently thought through and it was being rushed out. 1 year ago, it was better. Now it's pretty darn good. And typically things like this continue to progress because you're building from strength, not running into the face of I need to make revenue. This company does not need to make revenue. It has a nice revenue stream, but it has very, very patient investors, of which I'm the major one. And I would sooner not be embarrassed, but be satisfied.
We've got just a couple of minutes left, Bruce, and we've got a few questions coming in from people participating in the webinar. This one's really good. I want to get to it. What's the next quote unquote cannabis industry? So I assume they mean what's the next, hot, massive growth space that you see out there?
Well, remember, cannabis as a sector got a chance to be what it is because of 100 years of prohibition.
Mm.
So when you put things behind a moat, big wall, a big berm maybe, of prohibition, the effect is no reasonable scientific endeavors can pursue what could this do. And that same bias may apply to things like psilocybin, and I know it'll be terrible to say, but microdosing LSD and things like that. Because there's a number of psychedelic products which for a variety of reasons were banned, which have never been confirmed to necessarily meet their negative stereotype, but might in fact have material therapeutic benefit, say, for example, psilocybin, which people might know as magic mushrooms.
Mm-hmm.
There's underground studies to see whether or not this is the singularly best reset button for severe depression. And if what you can do is cause, with a heavy dose, someone's electrical functionality in their brain to do a hard reset, that might be a big deal. So I'm not saying it's as big recreationally, but if you think about medical impact, depression's a big deal. Many mood disorders need a constant drip feed of small amounts of medication. And there's a lot of people who use something called microdose LSD, which sounds like I'm advocating for Jimi Hendrix or something, but I'm not. He was macrodosing as far as I know.
Right.
But I think these things, the key attribute is if there's a prohibitionist bias, which withholds the ability to actually know the truth, then there may be a material market that is realized by unlocking that. I spent about 3 weeks at the beginning of the summer thinking maybe I'm never going to do anything in the cannabis space again, did it, don't care, don't want to do it again. So what am I going to do next on my own? And I spent almost 3 weeks trying to figure out who are the winners that result from global warming. And so, well, who the hell's a winner from global warming? Well, the fish aren't going to leave the ocean. Where are they going to go? We're going to catch them. If you can figure out genetics that can handle much higher heats in spring, maybe shorter growing seasons because you have a long cold winter and then a quick summer that's super hot. Maybe it's genetics. Maybe as you start to look around and think about, for every winner, no dollars are leaving the planet.
Right.
As far as now, more people are arriving. So for everybody who loses, if your house is flooded because you're too close to the water, the person 1 block back now has beachfront.
Yeah.
Oh shit, maybe you want to set up a REIT to buy housing that's 1 block back because maybe it'll be terrifically valuable for 100 years. I don't know. But if you stop and think about global warming, climate change is probably happening. There are going to be an equal number of winners. The problem is it gets super complicated because you start digging into tidal flow rates and trying to figure out where you should locate electrical generation capabilities. But for the people listening, there is no doubt in my mind that it is going to macro impact agricultural outputs differentially around the planet. And so what does that mean? A bunch of things. So I think stuff like that are big trends.
In closing, I wanted to make the connection between the franchise space we've been talking about and also the cannabis industry that we've been speaking about. And it feels like you're kind of you are in the middle of that Venn diagram at the Javits Center, right? Where you've got the cannabis folks and the franchise folks, and there's Bruce right in the middle. Do you see an application, or do you see anybody in the franchise space that's really going to be able to grow into the cannabis space in one way or another?
Yes.
Okay.
100%. So suppose you're a franchisee in America in a state that allows CBD, and you franchise a convenience, a C-store. What's going to be a product you start to have that drives traffic that is well structured? If you're in New York State by end of Q1, I bet you have a whole well-structured CBD segment in there, which drives traffic. Now, over time, why are dispensaries selling only cannabis when it's a regulated product and you can go to the C-store and you can buy liquor? You can buy beer, maybe not liquor, for sure wine. These crossover products are going to be big, but I think CBD is actually going to be, because what do we care about? If I'm running a C-store, I want to know how many tires hit the stop button at my door, I want to know if my age demographic goes up, if my average spend goes up, and whether or not I get them to use my the cash dispensing machine in my store. I want to see moves, and I think you're going to start to see crossover to franchises for products that need to be vended to high traffic versions. Right now, they're being sold at weird locations. I think that's going to be an actual 2020 Q1 in many geographies hot topic, and I don't know if they valued that into the franchise model in terms of the cost of purchase.
So it sounds like we're not even talking about the cannabis industry as its own space, but it's the effect of that within convenience stores or restaurants or healthcare or even spas and places like that, right?
If you have a franchise on a geriatric care environment, long-term care facility, and you are not prepared to be disrupted and positively disrupted by actually being able to differentiate your care using cannabinoids as the therapeutic platform, get ready for it. Because what's going to happen is you're going to decrease the mortality and morbidity based on drug overdoses. You're going to decrease, if things go right, the drug-on-drug interaction. So all of your customers are going to present with more cognitive capable social functioning, which means your labor cost goes down. And so I think the knock-on effect in the franchising world is going to be positive for so many places, because it's actually going to be a much less intrusive quality of care in that environment. It's going to be a higher traffic driver if you've got C stores. And you'll see people who end up with franchises that, maybe somebody will become the security courier for a certain geographic area or something. Those will be good. But I think you got to make it a little bit more complicated and say, how can I get into a business that if this quality of care or this type of location, which has good traffic, but is an undervalued store, that's where I think the cannabis profile of products are going to actually hit most for franchises.
Excellent. Very well said. Bruce, we're just out of time now. I want to thank you for joining me today, and to let everybody know who's on the webinar that an audio recording of this will be available at socialgeekradio.com and also at thebettersoftwarecompany.com. Bruce, thanks so much, and I look forward to chatting with you again in the near future.
No, thank you very much. And thanks everybody for paying attention to this. I appreciate it.
All right. Thanks. Bye-bye, everybody.